My name is Rena Cole. I'm 29, and until 2 weeks ago, I believed in tidy timelines. Proposals lead to weddings, weddings lead to homes, and homes lead to the kind of quiet that lets you hear your own life. I also believed that love would make hard rooms softer. I was wrong about at least one of those. By day, I run operations at Cole Hospitality Development in Austin. The company my father, Graham Cole, built with a measuring tape in his pocket and a code book under his arm. For 15 years, we've taken empty shells and turned them into places people celebrate anniversaries and sign deals and teach their toddlers how to swim in a too-cold hotel pool. It's not glamorous, but it's ours. I started in construction software years ago, learned who cuts corners and who loses sleep to meet specs, then joined my dad 3 years back because I wanted my name to mean something I could stand inside of. 7 months ago, my boyfriend Kevin Hale asked me to marry him. He is 31, warm-eyed, quick at reading rooms, a natural at talking nervous stakeholders off ledges, the kind of man who understands image. How a story is told matters almost as much as what is true. I loved that about him, until I didn't. Kevin's parents, Randall and Bethany Hale, run Hale Millworks and Design. Their work, when it's done to spec, is beautiful. Architectural millwork that wraps a lobby in confidence and makes executives believe their coffee tastes richer. But the last year had been tight for them. Cash flow issues, stalled projects, suppliers suddenly remembering the fine print on payment terms. I knew because my phone remembers everyone's panic. Here's where I probably made my first mistake, or did the bravest thing I've ever done. When our company began renovating a hotel in San Antonio, I advocated for Hale Millworks to take the lobby and executive lounge package, $1.2 million worth of work. I pushed for them because I trusted Randall's craftsmanship and because I was going to be family. The contract included the standards: quality control gates, progress payments, and a termination for a convenience clause with an $85,000 kill fee. Industry standard. Rarely triggered. Insurance against the worst version of tomorrow. The early deposits let Hale hire back crews and reopen supplier credit lines. Within a month, Randall walked taller, and Bethany started asking me in a tone that felt like a compliment if our wedding shouldn't reflect the real status of both families. Kevin and I had agreed on a budget, a venue that felt human, not imperial. But Bethany loved rooms that teach you how to behave the second you cross their threshold. She wanted more guests, more flowers, more of everything. The math of more never included who would pay. Fast forward to a hill country winery last Thursday night. The wedding was 6 days away. 6. We were there for a rehearsal wine tasting. Linen napkins, a view that looked like a screensaver, the kind of evening that should have tasted like certainty. We were making small talk about seating charts when Bethany clinked her glass. She'd found a better venue for the ceremony, a sprawling estate that cost 3 times what we'd budgeted. She used the word elevate and the phrase matching family. Standing with such practiced ease, I wondered how many mirrors she'd tried the speech in. I said calmly, "We've already committed, and I'm not comfortable with the change." Bethany smiled the way people do when they are about to call you unreasonable. Randall leaned back, the owner's posture, and looked at me like I was a clever intern who'd just overstepped. "Rena," he said, "you're a good girl. But let's be honest. You're not really on Kevin's level. This family has standards." For a long moment, the only sound was the quiet of other people pretending not to listen. I looked at Kevin. I needed him to say anything, to laugh it off, to say, "Dad, stop," to find my hand beneath the table and squeeze it. He studied his wine. Then he looked up, not at me, but at his mother, and said, "Maybe we should call off the wedding." There are words that feel like a trapdoor opening beneath your bones. I didn't cry. I didn't fight. I felt something inside me take inventory and close drawers. I stood up, walked to the host stand, paid the bill for everyone. When I returned, I nodded once to the table, to the life I had been setting out like silverware, and I left. No scene, no sound. Just the soft click of a door somewhere behind me that I knew I wouldn't reopen. Outside, the air was colder than it should have been. My hands were steady in a way that felt borrowed. I sat in my car, looked at the screen where my reflection floated over a list of names, and pressed the one that has never changed anything but my life: Dad. He answered on the second ring. "Pumpkin? Do you remember the termination for convenience clause in Hale's contract?" I heard the quiet in my own voice. It sounded like a signed document. There was a long pause that contained 20 years of me at his job sites, learning the difference between a mistake and negligence. Then, it'll cost us the $85,000 and a scheduling headache. It'll mean replacing them fast. It'll make some people angry. Are you certain? I watched a couple laugh under the winery lights. Kevin had once told me that lighting hides flaws by teaching you what not to look at. I am certain. Understood, he said, and his voice wrapped around me like a coat. I'll have Cole Legal draft the notice. This is business, but for the record, family first. I hung up and sat with the silence. My phone buzzed in my lap, texts stacking like receipts. I didn't open any. Inside the winery, I could see Bethany's gold bracelets flashing as she gestured. Kevin's head bent toward her, then away. On the drive back to Austin, the road unfurled in obedient lines. I kept thinking about the way Randall had said standards, like a password I didn't know. I thought about the way Kevin's pause had been longer than the love I'd believed in. When you spend too long shrinking yourself to fit a room, the first breath of full size can feel like arrogance. But it isn't. It's oxygen. At home, I took off the engagement ring, set it on the kitchen counter, and noticed how small it looked without a story around it. I brewed tea, because that's what people do in movies when their lives implode. They put water on heat and pretend something is under control. The kettle sang anyway. By Friday morning, the legal notice had gone out. Contract terminated for convenience. Effective immediately. Kill fee to be processed within 10 business days. Cole's vendor team, who are the kind of miracle workers that can restring a project mid-flight, had already started mapping replacements. The Slack thread pinged. Vendor replacement confirmed. New timeline established. Project continuity maintained. I responded with a single word, received. At 10:04 a.m., my phone rang. Randall. I let it go to voicemail. 10:07 a.m. Kevin. 10:11 a.m. Bethany. I set my phone face down and watched the lights skitter across the screen with each call like a storm I wasn't standing under anymore. I made a list, because lists feel like fences. Return dress appointment, cancel florist, update guest list from wedding to nothing. Practicality moves faster than grief. By noon, the first voicemail from Randall came in, clipped and businesslike. There must be a clerical error. By mid-afternoon, his tone turned frantic. By evening, he sounded like a man trying not to drown in a public pool. I walked around my apartment touching edges, the river stones on the bookshelf, the lip of the desk my dad and I built last winter, the photo of Kevin and me at Lady Bird Lake, where everything looked easier because we were standing still. I didn't delete it. I just turned it around. At 10:47 p.m., Kevin called again. I answered. Quiet on the line, our old friend. Then his voice, raw. Rena, it was a stupid fight. You can't. This will destroy my dad's company. I wanted to tell him that the word destroy was too dramatic for a choice with a clause and a fee. Instead, I said evenly, I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped holding it up. He inhaled like he'd been punched. We can fix this. We'll tell Graham it was pre-wedding stress. People fight. We can reverse it and work on us. Are you loving me, Kevin? I asked, or pricing me? Silence. Then the soft click of an ending. I set the phone down and let the apartment breathe. The city hummed outside, unbothered by the rupture in a single life. I washed my teacup. I locked the door. I wrote an email to my team with bulletproof facts and no adjectives. I slept like you sleep after moving heavy furniture. Ache in the joints. Clarity in the purpose. In the morning, there would be more voicemails. In the afternoon, a knock at my door. In a few days, the first whisper of the rot under polished wood. But that night, in the small between, I understood something that felt like a secret and a verdict. Power doesn't always shout. Sometimes it signs, dates, and sends certified mail. And when people tell you you're not enough to belong, sometimes the only way to hear yourself again is to leave the room so thoroughly there's no echo left to chase. The next few days were a blur of incoming calls and messages, an avalanche of voices demanding answers, pleading for reversals, and accusing me of being everything from emotionally immature to an outright villain. I turn my phone on silent more times than I can count. Sometimes silence is the only thing that makes you feel like you're still in control. It started with Randall. At noon on Friday, my voicemail inbox was flooded with his messages. The first one was an attempt to sound businesslike, as though this was a simple misunderstanding. Rena, it's Randall. There must be some kind of clerical error. Call me back. We need to fix this. He left the message like a lifeline, his voice tight with controlled panic. I didn't call back. By 3 p.m., his tone shifted. There was no attempt at professionalism anymore. Rena, the bank just froze our line of credit. We have materials on deposit and crews expecting payment. You need to call me back immediately. By the time the evening came, the voicemails were different. They were more like pleas for mercy than business calls. Rena, I can't make payroll without the next progress payment. Please call me back. This is serious. It took everything in me not to answer. The most disturbing part was the silence that followed. No one, not even Kevin, reached out after that. It was like they were collectively holding their breath, waiting for me to break and return to the role they'd cast me in, the one that saw my worth measured only by what I could contribute to their status. But I didn't break. I just kept listening. That night, my phone rang again. Kevin. He didn't even give me a chance to speak before his words spilled out, hoarse and shaking. Rena, it was just a stupid fight. How could you do this? How could you destroy my dad's business like this? You're tearing us apart. His words felt like they were stabbing through me, an accusation laced with desperation. But it was his last line that hit hardest. How could you hurt the family like this? I held the phone away from my ear for a moment, letting his words sink in. The family. The family that had told me I wasn't good enough for Kevin, that my value didn't match their definition of what he deserved. The same family who, after belittling me, now turned to me for help when their world began to unravel. I didn't respond at first. I let the silence hang between us. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, calm. Kevin, your family looked me in the eye and told me I wasn't good enough. You agreed with them. The goodwill that came with our relationship ended when you sided with them. I'm sorry, but this isn't just about business anymore. This is about how I'm treated, how I've always been treated. And now you're asking me to help clean up the mess they created? His response was almost immediate. I could hear the shift in his tone, the transformation from emotional to businesslike, the practiced PR tone he'd always used when trying to smooth over uncomfortable situations. Look, we can tell Graham this was just pre-wedding stress. People fight. They misunderstand each other. We can fix this, Rena. We can work on us. And that was the moment I realized how far gone we really were. How much of us was built on the image we projected rather than what was real. The weight of his words landed heavy in my chest, but I couldn't pretend anymore. I wasn't playing this game anymore. I was done being manipulated. So I asked him the question that had been eating at me for months, the question I had been too afraid to voice until now. Kevin, are you loving me or pricing me? Silence. The kind of silence that makes you feel like you're suspended in time, waiting for someone to speak. But Kevin didn't answer. The line went quiet, then the call ended without another word. I sat there in the dark apartment, staring at the phone. There was no satisfaction in it, no sense of triumph. It was just the quiet recognition that I had been trying to fit myself into a life that wasn't mine. I had been fitting pieces into a puzzle that was never meant for me. It wasn't even about Kevin anymore. It was about my own self-worth. And the fact that I had allowed myself to be belittled, dismissed, and discarded by people who never saw me as anything more than a pawn in their own little game. That night, I listened to the voicemails again. They were still coming in, one after another. Randall, Kevin, Bethany, they were all hoping I would respond, hoping I would step back into the role they had carved out for me. I didn't respond. Instead, I made a decision I didn't even know I had the strength to make. I stopped answering their calls, stopped listening to their messages, stopped questioning my own decisions, because in that moment, I realized that I had the right to choose my own narrative. I had the right to stop letting people decide my value. And as the days passed, the truth became clearer. This wasn't just about a broken engagement or a family business crumbling beneath its own weight. This was about me stepping into a version of myself I had been afraid to embrace, the version of me that no longer needed anyone's permission to be seen. At 9 a.m. on Saturday, I received an unexpected email from Tom, the shop foreman at Hale Millworks, who had been with the company for over 20 years. It was short and simple, but it hit me harder than any of the voicemails or accusations. Rena, I just quit. Randall asked me to downgrade the wood grade for the next material shipment to save money. It won't meet the fire safety specs required for public spaces, and it won't meet the quality standards outlined in your contract. I can't put my name on substandard work. Thanks for believing in us when you pushed for this job. Sorry it ended like this. The email sat on my screen, untouched, for what felt like an eternity. The weight of his words crushed something inside me. This wasn't just about an engagement, or a fight over a venue, or a family business collapsing. This was about the men and women who had worked tirelessly, who had poured their sweat and skills into the very company that was now being torn apart by greed and deceit. This was about integrity, the very thing that had been sacrificed by people who didn't know the difference between respect and self-interest. And so, without hesitation, I forwarded Tom's email to Cole Legal, copying my father's representatives on the San Antonio project. I didn't share it on social media, didn't make a public spectacle out of it. I simply did what needed to be done, and for the first time, I felt like I was taking the right steps, even if no one else saw it that way. The missed calls from Kevin's family stopped by Wednesday. I think they finally realized I wasn't coming back to play their game. But the echoes of their voices still lingered, and that was when I understood. They had wanted me to believe I was too small for their world. They had wanted me to shrink into their version of what was acceptable. But what I realized was this: when you let people define your worth, you lose the power to choose your own path. I chose my path, and by the time the weekend came, I had already started walking it alone. The next few days moved at a different pace. Time felt like it was stretching, twisting around me in ways I couldn't explain. The calls stopped, but the noise of it all, the drama, the fallout, still lingered in my head like an unfinished sentence. I kept telling myself that I had done the right thing, but the guilt that came with it gnawed at me in the quietest, most unexpected ways. My phone buzzed that Monday morning, but it wasn't from Kevin. It wasn't from Randall or Bethany either. This time, it was from Tom, the foreman at Hale Millworks. I opened the email cautiously, unsure of what I would find. His words were blunt, but I could hear the weight of what he was saying in every sentence. Rena, I'm sorry, but I can't keep doing this. Randall has asked me to downgrade the wood grade for the next shipment to save money. It's not up to standard, it won't pass fire safety codes, and it definitely won't meet the quality that your contract specified. I can't put my name on something like that. I'm done. But I wanted to thank you for believing in us when you pushed for the job. Maybe things could have been different. The email hit me hard. It was one thing to hear about the family's business problems. It was another thing entirely to realize that Hale Millworks had been willing to sacrifice quality and safety just to save money, and not just any money, but the money that had been given to them as a favor from my family. The $1.2 million contract that I had fought so hard to secure for them was now the very thing that had led them to cut corners. I stared at the screen for a long time, processing his words. It wasn't just a bad business decision. It was the kind of decision that could have cost lives. But for the Hales, it had all been about preserving their image, even if it meant putting the public at risk. That was when I realized something. The Hale family had been playing a game the entire time. The game wasn't about love or family, family, or even business. It was about power, and it was a game I didn't want to play anymore. I forwarded Tom's email to Cole Legal and copied my father's representative on the project. It wasn't a dramatic act. I wasn't seeking revenge. I was just doing what needed to be done. As I hit send, I knew that this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about people like Tom, hard-working individuals who were being asked to compromise their values for the sake of a family that didn't value them. I wasn't going to let that go unnoticed. By Tuesday afternoon, a quiet storm had started brewing in the industry. Through the grapevine, I learned that Hale Millworks had been blacklisted by a major general contractor. No press releases, no scandals, just a quiet administrative decision that took them out of the running for future projects. Hale's reputation, built on a history of craftsmanship and reliability, had started to crumble, and it wasn't even my doing. And yet, despite everything, Bethany and Kevin never stopped trying to reach me. Their texts and voicemails kept coming, but I didn't listen anymore. On Wednesday evening, I received a text from Kevin that finally made me feel like I was standing on solid ground. Rena, this has gone too far. I know my family is hurting, but we can still fix this. I never meant to hurt you. I read it, then I put the phone down. His words felt hollow now. A desperate plea from someone who had never understood what it meant to stand up for themselves, much less for others. I couldn't keep pretending that I was responsible for fixing everything. I wasn't. I had already fixed myself. It was around this time that Bethany came to my apartment. I knew it was coming. It had to. She knocked once, firmly, as if demanding that I open the door. When I did, she didn't speak at first. She just stood there, her arms crossed, her eyes calculating. "Rena, I came to talk to you," she said, her voice dripping with the kind of sweetness that only people who think they've already won can muster. "You've done a lot of damage to our family. You've taken away everything we worked for, everything Kevin and I have planned, and now—" I cut her off before she could finish. "And now you think I'm supposed to fix it. But I'm not going to, Bethany." Her eyes flared with anger, but she pushed it down, standing a little straighter, trying to hold on to that sense of control. "You know how hard this has been for all of us. Kevin is devastated, and I've spent my whole life building this family up. You think this is easy for me?" I didn't answer. Instead, I walked over to my counter and grabbed the engagement ring. I hadn't touched it since that night I left the winery. It sat there, on the counter, waiting for me to make the decision I had been avoiding. Bethany's gaze followed my every movement. "I should have known you were going to do this. Keep it, Rena. Consider it compensation for what you've put us through." Her words were sharp, but they didn't hurt anymore. I looked at the ring, then back at her. "I'm not keeping it." I dropped the ring into a small envelope and handed it to her. "You're right. It's compensation. But it's not mine to keep anymore. It's yours to clean up." It wasn't about the ring. It wasn't even about Kevin anymore. It was about taking control of the pieces of myself that I had allowed to be used against me. It was about refusing to be manipulated into feeling guilty for the things I had never done. Bethany stood there, holding the envelope, staring at it like she couldn't believe what had just happened. I didn't care. I didn't need her to understand. She wasn't my problem anymore. As she walked out, I closed the door behind her and locked it. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt the weight of the world ease off my shoulders. The next morning, Cole Legal called to confirm that Hale Millworks was being investigated for potential fraud. The audit trail showed inconsistencies with the signatures on a $120,000 advance payment request. It wasn't an official accusation yet, but it was enough to make the family's financial institutions jittery. They were about to feel the consequences of their actions. The news was both shocking and predictable. Randall had always been so sure of his place in the world, but he had never considered that there were consequences for cutting corners, for believing you could control the narrative without ever considering the truth beneath it. The phone calls from Kevin's family stopped after that. I think they realized that nothing they said would change what had already been set in motion. But that was fine. I was no longer interested in fixing something that wasn't mine to fix. I had learned that, in the end, you can't change people who aren't willing to see themselves. The only thing you can change is what you're willing to tolerate. And I was done tolerating it. The days that followed felt like a slow descent into something clearer, something far simpler than the emotional maelstrom I had been trying to navigate for so long. There were no more calls, no more desperate pleas. It was as though the silence that had started when I walked away from the winery had finally taken hold, giving me the space to breathe again. I could finally exhale without worrying about who was watching, waiting for me to break. But still, there were moments when I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, the familiar pull of doubt making my stomach turn. Had I gone too far? Was there some way I could have saved them from their own mess? Could I have spared Kevin the pain? Then I would remind myself, no, I couldn't save them. They didn't want saving. Not really. But that didn't stop the one nagging question that still haunted me, even after everything had already unraveled. What about the ring? Friday morning, my lawyer reached out. "Rena, we've sent Kelly a demand letter for the engagement ring. We've given her the opportunity to return it. The law is clear on this. The ring was a gift given in contemplation of marriage. Since the marriage never happened, it's legally yours to reclaim." It had always seemed like just an object to me, a small, shiny reminder of what was supposed to be. But now, the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the final tether to a life I'd let go of. I didn't care about the value of the ring. What I cared about was the fact that it symbolized everything I had tried to hold together for the sake of everyone else's narrative. It symbolized my willingness to bend, to compromise, to shrink myself into something they could mold. I could almost feel the weight of it sitting on my finger again, pressing down on me like a reminder of the love I'd mistaken for validation. But now I was done trying to earn anyone's approval. The demand letter was ignored, of course. Kelly didn't respond, not even with a message of defiance or an attempt to explain herself. Instead, she sent an email, 3 pages long, all about how I was the one in the wrong, how I had destroyed her family's reputation at the worst possible moment. She detailed their financial struggles, their broken dreams, and how the engagement ring had come to symbolize the only thing of value left for her, the last tangible piece of the life they'd promised her. I sat at my desk and read it, the words a mix of guilt-tripping and victimization. She blamed me for everything that had happened, but there was no apology, no recognition of her role in the collapse of our relationship. "The ring is mine now. It's the only thing I have left to hold on to," she wrote, as though that was supposed to make me feel something. I read it once, then again, then forwarded it straight to my lawyer. I didn't need to engage. I didn't need to justify myself. What she didn't realize was that her attempt to manipulate me into feeling sorry for her only made it clearer than ever that I had made the right decision. Later that week, I made a quiet but conscious decision. I reached out to the new vendor, the one that had replaced Hale Millworks on the San Antonio project. I knew I had a chance to make a difference, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. I didn't announce it to anyone. There were no press releases, no social media posts. I simply made a few calls and recommended Tom, the foreman, and 2 other senior craftsmen who had quit Hale Millworks over the safety issues. They were good people, people who had been caught in the crossfire of a family that couldn't see the value of integrity over image. The new vendor hired them immediately, and I made sure to keep it quiet. I wasn't doing it for anyone else's approval. I wasn't doing it to be praised. I was doing it because it was the right thing to do, something I had almost forgotten how to do for myself. When I saw Tom's email in my inbox confirming that he had found a job with the new crew, it hit me harder than anything else had. It was the kind of small victory I didn't need to explain, but I needed to feel. It was the proof that integrity wasn't just a word on a contract. It was the kind of value that kept people moving forward when everything around them seemed to be falling apart. A few weeks passed, and then one day, when I was driving through the neighborhood near the Hale family's home, I saw it. The for sale sign in front of their house. It was almost a cliche, but it hit me all the same. I remembered when I first met them. Their house was the picture of everything they wanted people to believe about them. Class, power, success. But now it was an empty shell, the exterior of a life they had constructed for everyone but themselves. I pulled over, staring at the house from my car window. It was like the last symbol of everything they had built had been washed away, and all that was left were the pieces that didn't fit anymore. And for the first time in a long time, I felt nothing. I wasn't angry, I wasn't sad, I wasn't anything. I simply didn't care anymore. That evening, I received a letter from my lawyer. It was short, factual, and to the point. The court had ruled in my favor regarding the engagement ring. It was mine to reclaim. Kelly was ordered to return it. 1 week later, a small padded envelope arrived at my door. I opened it and found the ring, sitting there in a cheap plastic pouch. There was no note, no apology, just the ring. I held it in my hand, turning it over slowly. The shiny stone seemed so much smaller now, so much less important than it had once seemed. I placed it on my counter, next to the note I had written to myself. This is the last time you'll ever let someone define your worth. But that was only part of the story. What mattered more was how the fallout from the Hale family's actions continued to ripple outward. As predicted, Hale Millworks lost its ability to secure new projects. The company's reputation had been tarnished beyond repair, not just by the contract termination, but by the ongoing fraud investigation that had begun to make its way through the industry. The Hale family didn't just lose business. They lost everything they had built over decades. By the time Randall signed the civil settlement with one of their suppliers, it was already too late. The house they had spent years building, their pride and joy, sold below asking price. Kevin and Claire moved into a rental townhouse, and Bethany stepped down from all of her charity board positions. As for Kevin, I didn't hear from him again. Not after the court case. Not after everything had finally fallen into place. And as for me, I took the time I needed to figure out where I wanted to go. I started seeing a therapist to work through some of the deeper issues I'd been carrying around for years. Not just about Kevin and his family, but about why I had spent so long ignoring my own voice. I took time off social media, stayed off my personal accounts for a while. Instead of scrolling through other people's curated lives, I found peace in small, physical tasks. Hiking hill country trails, volunteering with a nonprofit that repaired roofs for senior citizens. Work wasn't my escape anymore. It had become my place to grow. A month later, I walked into the lobby of the San Antonio hotel. It was finished. The new vendor had done everything by the book, following every specification, using the best materials. The work was beautiful, clean, and exactly what we had set out to do. Standing there, I received a text from an unknown number. "Thanks for the referral." I glanced at the message and smiled, typing a quick reply. "Do good work." I realized in that moment that sometimes the things you've been taught to believe, the things that others try to use to define you, are just illusions. What mattered now was this: I was good enough. And for the first time, I wasn't trying to prove it to anyone. I was just living it.